He said that he wouldn't be able to make it.
Which
I got hungry and ate it.
Or Sorrento.
You are voracious when it comes to free food. I saw that pile of desserts you had last
Says
night.
he hope he gets
Well,
some time to check out the.
I wouldn't have if I had a little more time.
Good evening.
That I could have.
Good evening and welcome to the Traverse City Planning Commission regular meeting on this Tuesday, May 2nd, 2023. This meeting is called to order. Please roll call.
All right, Commissioner Hassing.
Here.
Commissioner Jaturi.
Here.
Commissioner Hershey.
Here.
Commissioner Tuller.
Here.
Commissioner Colbert.
Here.
Commissioner Treadwell.
Here.
Commissioner Arnold.
Here.
Commissioner Knapp.
Here.
Commissioner Shaw.
Here.
Commissioner Martin.
Here.
All are in attendance today.
Great, thank you. Move on to announcements.
Yeah, just as a reminder, the Planning Commission will be hosting an open house to discuss the housing goals that they have adopted this year and last. That'll be on May 16th at 7 p.m. That is during the regularly scheduled study session, and that will be at the Park Place Hotel. And then the last item is the week before last, we conducted the neighborhood listening sessions as part of the master plan. It was pretty exciting. I think we went to 9 different neighborhoods and did 2 virtual sessions, talked to over 250 people. One thing that's interesting with that is we had a citizen follow us to every single one of them, including the virtual ones, named Gretchen Carr, and she has a podcast called The Traverse Cityist, and she distilled all the information that she heard down into about a 1-hour episode. So if you get a chance, I would encourage you to listen to it. It's a lot of
She
neat
did an
perspectives.
admirable
She
job.
did a
I had
very
no
nice
idea how
job.
she was going to do it, but she did a
Yeah.
good job.
Really good
Yeah, it was
job.
good. So, and that is it.
All right, thank you. Move on then to approval of minutes for the previous meetings. Any comments?
Yes,
Commissioner Treadwell?
I am marked as both present and absent
Yeah.
for the April 18th. I was not in attendance.
Yeah, I noticed actually on both of the sets of minutes, there's sort of a duplicate attendance versus not, and one of them is in conflict, and one of them mentions student liaison Ted Arnold as a commissioner, but what's his official title?
Student liaison.
Student liaison, and so we'll hope that gets corrected. Are there any other edits or comments about the minutes? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we accept the minutes from the last 2 meetings. Support.
Thank you. We have motion and support. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on to old business. This is a public hearing for a conditional zoning request submitted by Empire Sunset Investment LLC to conditionally rezone the contiguous properties at 523 and 525 Munson Avenue from C1 to C2 and 551 Munson Avenue from R1B to C2, and for possible recommendation to the City Commission. For introduction, Mr. Winter.
Yeah, thank you. So the current property owner is wishing to conditionally rezone these properties. He discussed at the last meeting that part of that desire is his current tenant, Third Coast Bakery, and the building that it is under C1 zoning can't expand at all. So he would like to address that and create some additional uses. And talking with the neighbors, he did decide to pursue a conditional rezoning, which would restrict the following uses or provide the following prohibitions. So no adult use marijuana retailer, no brew pubs, any building over 1 story shall not exceed 4,500 square feet in gross floor area per floor, no outdoor amplified entertainment, no use shall be open to the public between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., and the rooftop access is private, and no private rentals between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. So with that, just as a reminder, with the conditional rezoning, the Planning Commission cannot negotiate or offer additional conditions as part of any kind of recommendation. It's more of a take it or leave it. As we discussed at the last, or 2 meetings ago, when this was introduced, that the master plan does call for these parcels to be rezoned as C2 and has for some time now. So with that, I will turn it back over to the chair.
Okay, thank you. The owner of the property is here. If should we need further comment? But before that, we'll move to the commissioners and see if there are any comments from commissioners or questions or thoughts. Commissioner Knapp?
I just have a question, Mr. Winter. What you last said, it's been in the master plan for quite a while, the C1 or C2 zoning. Is that true, or is that the future master planning?
That's the current one. So that one was adopted in 2009 and then went through a review in 2017.
Okay.
Yep. And it's part of the future land use component and the zoning element. That's towards the back of the master plan.
Commissioner Colbert?
Yeah, so I wasn't here for the initial meeting, but I watched it today. And I really appreciate how much time and effort Mr. Winter and Ms. Mattis, is that how you say it? Have put into all of our packets. And I appreciate the mapping that we have. It really helps to make things clearer than I think it's ever been before. I am struggling. I am happy with the C2 designation for those first two properties, which are 523 and 525. I'm struggling with 551, and I don't know if anyone else is feeling the same. I went out to the properties, and it is a very wooded area with significant tree coverage, not just little sticks, but real trees. And I keep thinking about our major goals, both as a city commission and a planning commission for housing. And I'm wondering why we wouldn't rezone 551 as some kind of multi-housing only. If we do C2, I understand that they could be housing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that this particular developer, who has been very forthcoming with the neighbors, would be the one who actually develops that. It might be someone else. That property could change hands. And if we rezone that particular plot as C2, it could clearly become a strip mall or something else. And I'd love to see, it's an odd shape, it's a weird place. But I think that a clever developer could do an interesting housing thing there, trying to maintain some of the tree canopy. Maybe cottage homes, not facing the street. I don't know what the possibilities are. But anyway, I'm struggling with that. I don't know if anybody else is. I thought I'd throw it out there.
Commissioner Treadwell?
Personally, considering this is an application provided by somebody about 3 parcels, I think that they should be treated as one unit, particularly if, as part of a future redesign, there is a change in the driveway alignment so that it can be directly across from the Munson entrance, which I understand MDOT would like to see at some point in the future just to have greater alignment. But that would put the driveway in that 3rd parcel. So if there was consistent zoning classification across all 3 parcels, it would make it easier for that redevelopment, if that happened, without creating an odd quirk of, okay, we have a property line that's cutting through
Good point.
where the driveway will run.
I look at these 3 parcels and the way that they're sort of enveloped by the right-of-way, which is the undeveloped street, Perry Street, makes me think that, there's then 2 rights-of-way between these properties and the bay. There's Perry, then there's Agoza, then there's the bay. The houses on both sides of Agoza can, easily appreciate the water in the bay. I don't think that a residential property on 551 is going to be able to really appreciate the bay. Their proximity to the bay is cut off by 2 rights of way and multiple properties in between. They're really facing the highway.
Right.
And I feel like...
As are other houses. So.
As are other houses, but this is it's a largely commercial zone. My concern, though, I just wonder why, it was noted in an email about gas stations, and I'm wondering why gas stations weren't included in the conditional rezone limitations.
I agree.
I agree also with that.
You know, that's something that I would hope not to see come into this. All of the other uses I feel like would be, you know, relatively fine. You know, there's the trees, yes, there will be some loss of trees, but with the setbacks required in C2 and Perry and the trees that already exist on the properties, you know, behind it, closer to the water, I feel like there's going to be adequate screening. These properties are obviously going to be facing Munson and not the other direction. So I'm not, I don't have any problem with any of that except for a gas station.
I agree with you. I was talking to Mr. Winter about that, and he sees a difference between a gas station and a service station, and the usage says service station, but I still would like to see that as one of the exclusions.
Mr. Winter, is there a service station, filling station? Are there different?
Well, I would have to check with Dave Weston, the Planning and Zoning Administrator. So when I read that, it says service station with or without fueling. So to me, that distinguishes it as something other than just a gas station, because what's a gas station without fueling? So it's a repair shop that may have fueling or not. However, before my time, the True North was approved, which is in a C2 just down the street from there. So I don't know how the department has handled that in the past, but.
Okay, thank you.
But it is kind of interesting in that if it has been determined to be, in fact, a gas station, well, that may be a concern more broadly to the Planning Commission, because the C2 district sits against mostly R1 throughout the city. So maybe that's something that they would want to explore in the future.
I agree. As we relook at those C1 and C2 usage, for sure. I don't remember the approval. Does anybody remember when their approval for that True North happened?
2 years ago?
Was it?
No, it was
Oh.
before my time on the board,
How long have you been on?
since January of '21.
3 years ago, maybe, I guess? Probably.
There was that whole pandemic that smears time.
Yeah.
That time warp. I don't remember it. Was there, does anybody remember discussion of
Yes.
how that passed on a C2? Because it was a service station.
It existed and they
Yeah.
just expanded
Yeah.
and, yeah.
So if we wanted to put that on the exclusion list here, is that possible, given where we are in the process here tonight? No.
We would just
Now,
have to
only
reject
the applicant can modify that list.
Could the applicant
Only
do
they
that tonight? Or,
The applicant could do that at any point up until city commission approval.
I see.
Oh.
Okay.
Could we approve it on the condition that it would be changed? We would have to deny it, have it come again. Is there a time?
Well, you would recommend denial, and it would still then go to the city commission.
Ah.
In that time period that, you know, the applicant could modify his conditions. There are 2 liaisons here to the city commission, so they could explain to them, you know, how the planning commission felt and why they recommended denial, and whether or not any change to the application addressed the planning commission's concerns.
Okay.
But yeah, it's unique in that you can't say approve with this condition.
Right, no negotiations from
It's
the.
a
yeah.
thumbs up or thumbs down.
Okay.
Is it possible to have the owner speak to us now about how he feels about that?
If there's no other comments at the moment, we could.
And what the plan might be for that third parcel, if any.
It hardly matters.
Doesn't matter.
Okay. All right.
We, you know, whether we like gluten-free baked goods or not, it's not about, you know, this is allowing the zoning to change so that any use,
Anything.
it could be sold the next day.
Right,
and-
right.
And this zoning change is being pursued without a concurrent site plan that is going forward for a particular development. It's merely opening up more possibilities for future use.
Yes, right,
Okay.
that's correct. Commissioner Shaw?
Well, if we're adding other possibilities to the conditions, I'd like to see that in the 20-foot buffer or setback, that the trees that are there remain in that setback, that they're not cut down. And I'd also like to see that it says that an accessory building is permitted in the rear yard and shouldn't be no closer than 4 feet to the rear property line. I'd like to move that out of that rear property line, so it also doesn't cause that buffer of trees to be cut down, because if you've got 20 feet of setback plus Perry Street, that's a pretty good buffer. The only other thing I thought of was that, you know, the only way you can get in and out of Third Coast is to drive or to walk across the gas station and then the grass. It'd be nice to have an easement for a sidewalk, particularly if housing goes in there, so then people can catch the sidewalk on the other side of East Bay.
Mr. Winter, is there a requirement for sidewalks
Yes.
along that? Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so any new development on a curb street or any addition or improvement to an existing development exceeding $20,000 is required to put in a sidewalk if there is not one. And typically, the department will try to work with the property owner to get an easement. You know, we're well aware of the constrained right-of-way along US 31 through there, so that would be a topic that we would be discussing with them.
Great. Okay. Does
You'd be
anyone?
discussing, or it would be required? It would be required,
Required.
right?
The sidewalk would be required.
Yeah.
The easement's not required, but we would have that discussion with them.
Right.
Right, hopefully enough room so that it's not right on the curb
Yeah.
and such, and to a safe distance away, provide the possibility of a tree lawn, perhaps.
Could, in future planning, say, even if Perry Street is never going to be developed as a street, it could be allowed as an additional sidewalk connection to 8th Street on the far northeast corner that would allow, say, if there was an apartment building built here, that people would be able to quickly and easily walk to East Bay.
Yeah, well, and I see cyclists come by there, you know, they're crossing on 8th Street, you know, in the warmer months, unlike today.
Yeah.
And there's, you know, significant numbers of cyclists I've seen coming by there, and if they could access that property, that would be a benefit as well. Do people have direct questions for the applicant, or did you just want to hear just a statement? Would the applicant want to speak? You're invited to come to the microphone.
Good evening. John Collins, Empire Sunset Investments. As the applicant, good to be here, good to listen to you. Can I freelance this a little bit based upon your discussion?
Yes.
I have no intention to put a gas station in there. And it came to my attention only today that was one of the allowed uses in C2. I was talking to one of the community neighbors who we've worked with on our restriction list, and I am more than willing to add service stations to one of those restrictions and put them in the category of brew pubs and marijuana distributors. So I'm willing to do that. Regarding the trees and everything and setbacks, I think we should keep whatever the standard. I'd recommend we keep the standard zoning guidance for those type of things that are within your zoning code. I would like to address, just for a minute, the reason why we're applying for this is the current zoning, as was presented a month ago at the meeting. The C1 office service district is generally not that much in demand and not consistent with our vision for the property. The neighborhood center district C2 zoning, which we're requesting, provides a range of food service and health-related options for that site. And that's what we're looking at, are options to go along and complement the gluten-free, dairy-free, allergy-friendly Third Coast Bakery. As was pointed out a minute ago, the current zoning doesn't allow us to change that footprint by 1 square inch. The C2 zoning would allow that. And I think it's important to note here, the Third Coast Bakery is a tremendous Traverse City startup success story. It's a woman-owned business. It started in a home kitchen, selling at farmers markets. The owner, Heather Burson, and her husband, that's when I first met them. And anyone who wants to take a hard trek, take that trek. They moved up from farmers markets to a part-time commercial rental kitchen, to another less part-time commercial rental kitchen, to a farm commercial kitchen out in the middle of nowhere, and now to the location, which I hope is going to be their permanent location, on Munson Avenue. So it would be a darn shame for them not to be able to modify that building to improve their operations and customer service. Now, regarding the overall site, we have a vision for the site, and that is for other complementary health-focused businesses with products, food service products, other related health-focused services to come to that site. And that doesn't preclude a C1 use. It doesn't preclude residential uses. But we want that to be that's our vision. And we've reached out to the community to get their comments, and some of the community members are here tonight, and I'm sure they're going to speak, and I spoke to one of them today about the service stations, and we were both surprised about that. And I hope we've cleared the deck on that concern. But the conditional zoning restrictions, which we voluntarily set forth, address the comments that can be accommodated that we've received from the community, that we can accommodate, but we have to maintain the economic viability of the site. One example of the restrictions and how it plays with the community is the operating hours we agreed to and the building sizes, if there are ever, and there may not be, but if there are ever buildings over 1 story, they will be at the footprint of the C1 current classification, as well as the operating hours are at the current C1 classification. So it's been a good process for me to work with the community, and I appreciate you considering it tonight, and I look forward to it being approved. Thank you. And if there's any other questions, I'll answer them. Any?
Well, that you just now answered my question about how you arrived at the 4,500 square foot footprint, because I was looking at some of the other properties along the Munson Avenue corridor, largely those built originally as hotels, but some of which are currently residential buildings or have been assisted living facilities. And you do have buildings that are above that 4,500 square foot size.
That's right, and this was a compromise with the community because they did not want to see a building there with an overpowering presence. So it wasn't my idea, it was their idea, but I was willing to make that compromise.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Collins. Are there any other questions for Mr. Collins before
Can
he
I just
steps forward?
ask, just
Oh,
to
yeah.
verify,
Okay.
so, John, you are saying that you are willing to add the additional prohibition to service stations
Yes,
to your conditions voluntarily?
yes.
Okay.
Does that
Mr.
mean
Winter,
that
does that
we could
mean-
go ahead without voting against it
Right,
tonight?
That was my question, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would ask that the applicant then provide it in writing to me by Friday so I can put it in the packet for the next city commission, well, 2 city commissions away. And then we would just modify the motion that's in there to include the prohibition of service stations voluntarily provided by the applicant.
Excellent, thank you.
So we would vote to approve,
To recommend.
to recommend approval with the condition voluntarily supplied by the
So in other words,
provider.
you didn't impose the condition, the applicant did.
Okay, great. There is an option, but, so if there's further discussion, let's have it. Otherwise, we'll entertain a motion.
Oh, motion
I'm
before the
sorry.
public hearing?
Yeah, let's do the public hearing. I'm sorry. Now, we'll open up the microphone to the public. If you'd like to speak on this topic, please approach the microphone, state your name, whether your address, whether you're a Traverse City resident, and you'll have 5 minutes.
Hello, is that right? My name's Sue Chang. I live at 521 Agosa Trail. In 1904, my great-grandparents bought the property at 8th and Agosa, and both my parents and my grandparents retired and lived there until their deaths. I'm a little bit protective of the area, and I've lost a decent amount of sleep over this rezoning potential. I understand the properties are bordered on one side by Munson Avenue and the adjacent BP gas station. Please keep in mind that they're also bordered on the other 3 sides by residential properties, as you can tell from the packet pictures that are great. We worry about noise. We worry about how the lighting is going to affect the neighbors whose homes back up to the lots. I worry about building height and mass and the increase in impervious surfaces. I worry about attempts to manage the storm runoff on site and to keep it out of the sewer and out of the stormwater system that's already overburdened. I worry about the wildlife that lives on that heavily wooded lot. All of that said, I want to thank Mr. Collins for his willingness to meet with the neighbors. I appreciate that he added the conditions that he did to his rezoning request. I certainly appreciate that he just stood up regarding the gas stations. Mr. Winters, the service station, does that mean repair, oil change, all that kind of automobile?
That is what I believe. I will need to look in to
Okay.
clarify with Dave Weston.
Okay, I just was going to say, I spent a lot of time with John, and I believe he is sincere in wanting to create something that can be respectful of the nearby residents. I want to believe that he cares about the trees and the bay and the wildlife, and that he will minimize the disruption to the environment if this rezoning request is approved. Back to the restless nights, what if John isn't the ultimate developer of this land? This is where I was going to ask about the gas stations, because I was concerned about gas stations, automobile service, and other repair services that wouldn't be compatible with the environmental sensitivity of the site. They're very special lots, you know that, Mr. Collins, and whether they are developed as C1 or C2, I asked that the Planning Commission remain engaged and concerned. Please set high standards for the project and protect this special land and the trees that have welcomed the visitors to Traverse City for centuries, over a century. One question, can I say something else about Perry Street? There are some deed restrictions that Perry Street can't be open, so I don't think a sidewalk or any kind of an open pathway would be allowed there either. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chang. Going once, going twice, seeing no others, we will close public comment. And back to commissioners. Commissioner Shaw.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's nothing against Third Coast Bakery. I love their product, but without that extra buffer of trees, I can't support this. It's very narrow. It's between Munson and the bay there. I know it gets a lot narrower as you go further east, but that's all residential. It's covered with, they're covered with trees. To open that whole thing up, and take all those trees down. I don't know if you're going to take all those trees down, but there's nothing in here that says that you can't not take all those trees down. It affects the water quality, it affects the neighborhood, the tranquility of the neighborhood. I just can't support it.
Thank you. There is a minimum tree canopy requirement in
Our tree
C2.
ordinance should kick in here.
Yeah, right. So if the
Because
larger
it-
ones are cut down, they're going to have to contribute to
little
the tree fund, but
tiny
also
things
plant
back up
new
again.
trees. And regarding stormwater, the letter that we received from the watershed, they mention if stormwater can't be, if there's no ability to infiltrate or evapotranspirate the stormwater on site, is there any reason that they wouldn't be able to take in the stormwater on site?
Really, there's two main reasons why that would be the case. One, if it's a contaminated site where you don't want to further contribute to groundwater contamination. I don't know that that is the case with this property. I've not heard that. Or if you have a very, very high clay content, so it's not very permeable.
And
Okay.
to that second point, this area does have pretty sandy soils, as evidenced by the white pine stands above it. So infiltration shouldn't be a problem as long as they have sufficient storm drains for their parking lots and whatever, that it can keep all stormwater on site and funnel it into the ground rather than run off into the bay.
Commissioner
Will there
Kovler?
be a site plan review when the plans are finally put into place, or will this all be by right?
Well, if they choose one of the uses there by right, then it would be by right. The plans will be reviewed. Whether they're reviewed by the planning commission or not is dependent on what he proposes. If it's over 500 trip ends, it comes to the planning commission, still goes through all the review and requires all the permits after that. If not, then staff reviews it, and again, all permits have to be pulled, including stormwater permits and land use permits and things like that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Shaw?
When I looked at the site, I did wonder about contamination. The parking lot goes around that big rectangular area has the big depression all the way
A
through it?
previous building site?
That's all it is. It's not like it was a brownfield gas
No.
station, they cleaned it out.
It was the former
Social-
Social Security
Oh,
office.
it was? Oh,
Yeah.
that's right.
It
I
got
remember
condemned
that.
and torn
Okay.
down.
Okay.
Yeah, so
If we're talking about the general area, I might be concerned about 2008 East 8th Street as directly behind the BP gas station as potentially contaminated, as well as the location of the BP gas station itself. But this appears to be far enough away unless there were very significant issues about that gas station.
Any other thoughts, or we will entertain a motion?
Will the motion need to be altered to include?
So the second to last line where it says, with the conditions voluntarily submitted by the applicant, with the addition to prohibit service stations voluntarily submitted by the applicant, be recommended.
Anybody going to
No
move
one's,
on this?
no one's jumping for it.
No, somebody can do it.
If we,
You were taking notes.
what else can happen if nobody's jumping for a motion? How does this,
No,
how do we move beyond, how do we
I'm
move
happy
beyond
to
this?
move, but I don't,
Yeah.
again, I'm struggling
Are
with
you
where
not
to put-
seeing the second page of that topic?
In the
Is the
memo.
mo-
I can do it.
Oh, it's up in the
I move that the
memo.
request initiated by
Yeah.
Empire Sunset Investments LLC authorized applicant to conditionally rezone the
okay.
properties commonly known as 523 and 525 Munson Avenue from C1 Office Service District to C2 Neighborhood Center District, and the 551 Munson Avenue from R1A Single Family Residential to C2 Neighborhood Center District, with the conditions voluntarily submitted by the applicant, in addition to the prohibition of service stations also voluntarily submitted by the applicant, be recommended to the City Commission for approval.
Well done.
Very done.
Support.
Very good.
And support. We have the motion and support. Ready to vote? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Okay. I will need to do a roll call vote. So all those in favor?
No, you'll have to just
No,
see each
one
name.
at a time.
individually. Yeah.
Each name individually. Okay. So that would be Commissioner Hassing,
Aye.
Commissioner Duturi,
Aye.
Commissioner Hershey,
Aye.
Commissioner Tuller,
Aye.
Commissioner Colbert,
Aye.
Commissioner Treadwell,
Aye.
Commissioner Knapp,
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw,
Nay.
Commissioner Martin.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. We'll look forward to that, headed to the City Commission, and thank you all for your time regarding that. Moving on now to another old business item, consideration of an amendment to the Traverse City Code of Ordinance to allow additional dwelling types and to modify dimensional standards in the R1A, R1B, and R2 residential zoning districts, and to possibly set a public hearing. For introduction, Mr. Winter.
Yeah, so the story map that staff created to kind of outline your established goals related to housing was presented at the last meeting. There was no consensus established about modifying it at all, so nothing substantive has changed in the story map so far. We did do a couple tweaks, as mentioned in the memo. The word new, when talking about vehicle ownership, was added. That was simply an omission as an error. In defense of the Planning Commission, as you have heard and we see too, there's been a lot of statements that the Planning Commission is rushing this. In reality, the Planning Commission has been working on this for 3 years. So we had previously added the 2023 goals on there in the goals section. Laura went through and added the 2022 and 2021, so people can see that that was, in fact, something that has been established, and those were approved unanimously all 3 years. So in 2021, the goal was more broad, and there was a lot of discussions that year, which kind of led to the items in the 6 bullet points that were in 2022, which we did not get time to address, so now they carried over to 2023. And to further support the Planning Commission on that, Laura went through and put meeting links to all the agendas. I think some 20 meetings that this has been discussed publicly over the last few years. There was, earlier this week, since the packet came out, a letter from Groundwork added and towards the last section. So procedurally, before any recommendation of the Planning Commission can be taken on a zoning amendment, a public hearing needs to be held. So with the notice requirements, staff is recommending to go ahead and set that public hearing so that we can get the notices out. It would occur after the open house because of the notice requirements, so you'll still be able to work with the public, and then they'd be able to come to the public hearing, of course. And discussions could continue thereafter, but nothing could be done until the public hearing is held.
Okay. Thank you. Here it is, housing zoning amendments. There's a lot of reasons that we're looking at these changes, and so this is not meant to solve the entire housing problem locally or regionally, but the attempt here is, and it's not meant to be specifically affordable. It's meant to create housing variety, allow for housing variety, since over 80% of our residential land is zoned as single-family only. We don't allow for very much housing variety, and that excludes a lot of people from different socioeconomic backgrounds that should also have an opportunity to enjoy living with all the benefits of living in town. And so this is put together as a group of amendments to allow for incremental infill where housing units could possibly fit. It is not necessary that we go forward with all of these amendments. We have the opportunity tonight and further on at the public hearing and after further feedback from residents and the community at our open house next in 2 weeks from now. And also beyond what we do here at the Planning Commission, at the City Commission, there's also further opportunity to refine these ideas to make sure that we're doing right by the community with these ideas and not causing unintended consequences. But the idea generally is that more people and more neighbors are a good thing, and we want to allow for more people to live in town and in more ways, more housing types. So with that, we'll turn to the commissioners. Are there any comments, any concerns, or ideas about these amendments in front of us? Commissioner Knapp.
I support most of it, but I remember it was discussed at the the study session a couple weeks ago. But in many of these sections, the residency requirement was struck out, whether it's an accessory dwelling unit or duplex, triplex. Can someone comment to that?
I'm sorry, when you say residency, do you mean owner occupy?
Yep. Owner of record shall occupy either the primary or,
It was struck, it was changed from, I'm sorry, from
It
earlier.
looks like it was struck out of most of these sections.
Oh, yes,
Completely.
right.
And can someone just defend that or explain the rationale behind that? I know it was discussed a couple weeks ago.
The only owner-occupied requirement in our zoning ordinance is regarding ADUs. Is that correct, Mr. Winter?
Yeah.
Yes. So with ADUs, we when ADUs were originally approved, a requirement for to occupy either the ADU or the primary residence was put in place as it was the politics of allowing ADUs in the first place. They were met with a lot of hesitation and concern, and so adding that requirement was meant to help people potentially embrace the opportunities that an ADU could bring to the community, and so it's that was what the purpose of it. The reason that it was struck out was that we don't really have properties all over town like duplexes, triplexes, and multifamily units where there is no requirement for any owner to live on site. And so there's sort of there's an unnecessary burden with an ADU, given that it is simply another opportunity to have a rental dwelling unit on a property. And so there didn't seem to be a need to continue, given that the ADU creation across this city has not been like a flood of construction. It's never met. Has it ever met the 15-year cap? The 15-year cap? I don't think it has. So the owner-occupied aspect is not. It is on the table to be done away with, so that we can, because it seemed unnecessary.
That was that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And can I just add,
Please.
so administratively, it's having some unintended consequences. We have a case that we're dealing with right now where there is a husband and wife that own the home and live in it, and they have an ADU and they rent it out. The wife is in the Air Force Reserve. She's been called up, so they have to move for 3 years. So they're going to rent their house out. So technically, when that ADU lease ends at the end of the year, that person has to vacate, and it can't be an occupied dwelling unit anymore since they're not owner-occupied on the house. So that's some of the problems that
Does that kind of lead into why that can be changed or approved administratively? And I forget, I don't have it marked here, sorry. Someone commented through email, it might have been the same story. Opposed to going to a public hearing to subdivide a single-family home into 2 units, I think it was.
Okay, yeah, so right now, the zoning ordinance allows for a larger single-family home to be converted into a two-dwelling home, a duplex. It does require a special land use permit, which is a pretty onerous process, and as David and I were looking at, the standards for it are quite steep. It's very difficult to actually do, so then recognizing that we do have duplexes throughout, it was suggested just to make them by right, because again, if we're trying to add more housing variety, we want to try to address the barriers that are existing to that goal.
Mr. Winter, is it possible to have the special land use permit process be less onerous?
So there is an administrative, so there's 2 types of special land use permits, and if you get into that chapter of the zoning ordinance, there's city commission ones, and then there's administrative ones. So the administrative ones still send out the notice to the 300 feet and hold a public hearing, but it's held by staff, and it doesn't then go to city commission.
And would one of our options through this process be to, say for something like a quadplex, could we say, it would still be required to be only through a special land use permit, but then have that process be reduced in with requirements?
Yeah, that would be possible. I think the question would be what is being achieved through that process? Like, what is it that what objective is trying to be met by making it that process as opposed to by right?
Right.
Yeah.
Just off the top of my head, I'm thinking about the concerns that we've heard that maybe we're doing that this entire package might be too much all at once, and if we wanted to stage this in a way, we might have opportunities for allowing more and not yet allowing all of it all at once. But that was just an idea. Commissioner Shaw?
I am not in favor of scrapping the owner occupancy for ADUs. There's tons of information out there that supports it, like the Brookings Institute. It says owner occupancy requirements prevent property owners from developing repeat expertise in acquiring and renovating existing housing stock to add to ADUs. As a result, lenders are less likely to finance ADUs. Also, owner occupancy rules constrain supply because each existing house can only give rise to 1 rental unit, not 2, and homes owned by non-residents cannot add an ADU. Well, whoa, what I see in that is developers developing and their financial needs. I don't see residents making a community. I see investment opportunities for absentee landlords. And in the draft housing chapter of the master plan, there is an estimate in there that says that by 2030, 40% of all single-family homes in the United States will be owned by private equity. 7.7% of our housing in Traverse City is already owned by private equity. I see that as a huge red flag, and that owner occupancy not requiring owner occupancy for these ADUs can only increase that percentage. I think also that non-owner occupied ADUs undermines the whole concept of what an ADU is, what a granny flat. It isn't an additional dwelling unit, it's a multi-family land use. So I am in favor of ADUs by right in owner-occupied housing, however, and I have lots to say about that, but we can stop there.
Okay, thank you. Some good points.
If I may.
Chief Tuller.
Right, I have the same concern regarding ADUs, and, also part and parcel of that in the same conversation was, I was here when we started talking in earnest about ADUs, and it was, I don't know, 3-4 years ago, 5 years ago, something like that, and we were talking about what the number might be, and we talked about a percentage of land area, and then we talked about a cap of 25, and then a 10, and 15, so we settled on a cap. But I think in here too, I believe the intention is to remove that cap. So, I mean, if I had a crystal ball, I'd probably own my own island somewhere, but it seems to me that the concern that Heather made, Commissioner Shaw made, with the possibility of there not being a cap, that once that horse has left the gate, it's going to be hard to wrap our arms around it. And there's potential for that. Not saying that's what's going to happen, but there's a potential for that. And as planners, I think we do a good job of looking at those things.
Good point.
This is a tough one for me too, because owner occupied, I was around when we decided that, and it seemed like a safe thing to do. I also am concerned, we only put a 3-month, we put a minimum 3-month lease on ADUs, and I actually think that should go to 6 months. I think since we've had the influx of people here in the summer, specifically with the horse community, the 3 months seems to be being abused a little bit. And so that would be another thing I would think about. But again, I'm not sure, I don't know where those kind of tweaks happen. I don't know if they happen here or if they happen when we take this to the city commission. I don't know where those very specific, just tightening it up a little bit, things should happen. Mr. Winter, do you have a feeling about that?
I would say anywhere along the way, anywhere in the process.
If the city commission does it, because I remember when they did it to us on C1, C2, on short-term rentals, which we weren't happy about, we shot it up to them, they shot it back to us, it got kind of ugly. Is it better? Is it better for us to do it here rather than, I don't know.
I would think that putting verbiage behind our recommendation would
Yeah.
be a good way to go.
But I don't especially want to do any of that until after we have the thing on the 16th and we have the public hearing. I want to hear the things that I'm not thinking of that could go sideways before I consider any tweak. And I want to hear the people who are thrilled about this and what opportunities it opens up for others as well. So I don't feel the need to do anything like that before we move forward on this next public engagement piece.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Commissioner Duterte?
Same. At this stage, we're just moving for the public hearing, which is then happening after the open house. And at the public hearing, we'll get more input. And then it moves on to the city commission where I think we're allowed to make as many tweaks as we want. And I think the city will also make plenty of tweaks. And they're the people that are elected by the residents, so more of the weight should be carried by the city commission.
I agree.
We're just providing the recommendations for what the current and future zoning should look like, and then you can carry what you want from that. So I think at this point, it makes sense to just move for the public hearing and then start that process.
That's all we're doing.
Yeah, procedurally, even if it doesn't end up getting bounced back or having delays for future rewrites or any changes, it's already a 2-month process that has significant public input with open house, with public hearings, and et cetera. So there is certainly an opportunity just through the normal process to refine and hone it as needed. So
we're all kind of pointing toward taking this package and setting the public hearing with certain items dog-eared, namely owner occupancy for ADUs. I might also add, ADUs with duplexes. That might be a step too far just yet. Well, considering we don't have an owner occupancy requirement for duplexes, those two pieces would go hand in hand. But, that's another thing that I sort of note as, maybe that would be something where it comes a little later once we see what an uncapped situation and split lots and the idea that we can fit more dwelling units into our town. There could still be room to come back to owner occupancy or ADUs alongside duplexes. Commissioner Duterte.
The only two other things that I'll say is the more restrictions we put on this process and on these, the more things we remove, the less opportunity there are for housing. There's no guarantee that all of these things will happen. We're just offering the opportunity. And then the second point is, in terms of owner occupancy, isn't there a way around it in that you could just legally say that you live there and just not even be there anyway? So there's already the possibility of that, right? Because you could have your primary residence that you register to vote at as your legal residency. And I'm probably sure that exists in this town, where that's somebody's legally main
Just
residence.
once. You can only do it once.
Right. sorry. So then I'm tripping up on my own words now, but that, I feel like that's already possible in that you could work around it.
Yeah, I mean, we have plenty of people that claim their primary residency here in Traverse City, but they spend 4 or 5 months in the winter elsewhere in a warmer climate and stuff.
Correct.
Or
So
even-
in theory, that person could then be owner occupied, but still renting out that unit. So it doesn't actually guarantee the presence of a human being.
No, but it does guarantee that you can't do it twice, which
And
is the problem with the larger corporations buying up all the properties and the scary scenario is avoided.
You have also scenarios of somebody owning a property in Traverse City and then, say, in Long Lake Township as well. But even though they spend most of their time at the property in Long Lake Township, they could claim the property in Traverse City as their principal residence because it has a higher taxable value. But then it would go to our Board of Tax Review to try to contest whether that or their Long Lake residence is where they're actually spending more of their time.
We're not going to be able to anticipate every single possible
No.
scenario.
Right.
that
I
is,
was
so-
just trying
right.
to make
Yeah.
a point in terms of
And you're right.
owner occupancy.
And you're right. But also the previous story that Director Winter just told us about a renter is going to have to get kicked out because somebody's been called up. That's ludicrous. So
It's a shame.
it really is. So we're going to have to think very carefully. That's all I can
Commissioner
say.
Shaw, I believe, had
Never
her
mind.
hand up.
Sorry.
I'm confused. Usually when we send something to public hearing, we're satisfied with how it looks. But then I'm hearing we shouldn't touch any of it. I am very confused.
I think the idea is that these are proposals that we want feedback from, and we're going to get feedback from both the open house and the public hearing.
And then we bring it back and start pulling out things that
Certainly.
we have
Yes,
problems with?
because if we take it out now, then we don't even get to have a full conversation about it at the open house
Or the public hearing.
or the public hearing.
Okay, but I'm going to say that, there's a lot of data in this, particularly in that draft housing chapter, that supports this omnibus of package. But there's a lack of data from the municipalities that have actually tried exactly the same thing, this blanket upzone approach. And I understand, it's like taking a bunch of spaghetti and throwing it against the wall and some of it's going to stick. But this is a big experiment in this place that we love. And do we really want to, unintended consequences could be just drastic.
But I'm curious, could you be more specific
Yeah,
about the big?
there are 2 examples in the U.S.
No, I mean the big changes you're talking about, the big, what is it that concerns you about?
Well, just
Is it
all
the
of these
splitting
things,
of a
if we
lot that's too big?
allowing duplexes and ADUs and duplexes, and they're all purchased by non-residents.
Those are all dog-eared for
Right.
removal?
Yes. I have big concerns about lot width.
Okay. The lot width,
Lot width. I've asked questions about these measurements from the beginning because they don't adhere to Parallax missing middle housing recommendations. And according to him, they will not deliver predictable built results. What you get are these tall skinnies, and because it's the easiest thing to build. And you get this tall skinny building or series of buildings, because if you can build a quadruplex, you're just going to build them all together. And they loom over the neighbors. It's an unbroken mass from the front to the rear. You could put your parking underneath, still adhering to all the setbacks. It's just that the setbacks don't work. You have to put limitations on the width of the building. And I've asked about this, but I haven't heard anything. And to be very clear, the last time we looked at residential zoning in detail, it was September of 2021. That's the last time. We looked at the R2, changes in the R2, and we voted it down. That is the last time. So we haven't even seen this. This is the first time I've seen the R1 changes, well, when it came through the packet last month. So, I mean, there's just a lot of stuff in here that I have problems with.
Regarding lot width, Mr. Winter, do you have the change?
I'd like to see graphics, how it's going to work. And maybe it needs some, some design parameters of how you could, not design parameters, but you can limit the width of the building and according to what Pavlik has to say to get predictable built results. And we should be able to see that graphically.
Right. Mr. Winter, do you have something to?
Yeah, I would just say that there is no change being proposed to the height in the district. So no building could be taller than what's currently allowed in either the R1 or the R2. There's only one small portion where we're talking about decreasing lot width, and it's by 10 feet, and that's in the area kind of at the base of the peninsula. So everything else would stay the same in terms of lot width. And these were explicitly, I'm looking at them here in both the 2022 and 2023 goals, mentioning these changes to R1AB in more than one location. So again, this hasn't been hidden.
Also, that I saw that there is all, if contiguous properties are purchased and in the R2, and someone were to put together townhouses, they can only have 4 units in a single structure. They can't build them indefinitely. It would only be 4 next to each other. So there, in that sense, those are limitations, and those would have side setbacks and rear setbacks and, the same setbacks that are already in place for our residential zones. Commissioner Treadwell?
Yeah, I've got a number of things to talk about, but if we're talking about setbacks now, even though it's not in this package, I would be interested in looking at providing the opportunity for more attached housing, attached single-family townhousing, as we were just mentioning, because yes, in this set of zoning or changes, you can allow up to a 4-plex of townhouses, assuming the lot widths and other factors align. But I would be interested in seeing if, say, you have existing narrow lots that could allow for small houses, but you can provide a slightly larger house if you essentially build a duplex that is split by the lot line.
On 2 different lot properties?
Yes. So
I don't think you would be able to do that.
I know. I'm saying you wouldn't be able to do that now. You wouldn't be able to do this in these proposed ordinances, but that would be something to potentially investigate in the future if we're looking at small tweaks in our zoning code that could provide additional opportunities.
So I think that would already be allowed, what you're describing, but it's not regulated through the zoning ordinance. It's regulated through state legislation with the Condominium Act. So that's, you create a site condo in that case, and then each unit can be owned individually. We have that with a lot of our duplexes now, but you can't have a building straddling two different lots with different legal descriptions and things like that.
There would be side setbacks, right? Where we, in our residential zone, you can't build, it's 6 feet or, you know, so you wouldn't go to the lot line unless you were in a commercial zone. You could do it in a commercial zone. We have examples of townhouses just around the corner.
Yeah.
But not in the residential.
I
Commissioner
agree with
Colbert?
Commissioner Hershey that we can't think of every permutation of how this is going to play out. But I do want to assure those of you who are new to the Planning Commission and to those people listening that when we miss something, and again, we live in the neighborhoods as well, when we miss something, we do correct it. And so those of you who say, oh, that ADU down the block from me, it's bigger than the house. Oh my God, you can't have a bunch of those. We fixed that. That was a mistake. We admit we made a mistake there. And so on the times that we sometimes miss something, we are certainly willing to say, yep, we didn't do that right. We've got to take that back. So there is that as well.
It's true, the Hotel Indigo is built too close to the road, but and there are no future
fixed
buildings
that.
that can be built that close to the road anymore because of
Yeah,
that
so some of the
change.
things that you hate the most, we know are bad. And they did get fixed.
Or the 3-story house on Oak Street
Yeah,
with
that
a flat
was-
roof.
Yeah.
That caused us to change how we measure roof height in that sort of residential structure.
And many of us were here at that time. That
Yes.
particular piece was, we tried to do something nice for somebody, and it seemed to make all the sense in the world, and we passed it, and somebody else came to town and said, okay, I can do this then. And so.
As well, that
You know,
house-
you can't think of everything.
The house
but
on Oak
you try.
Street also has a 3-story breezeway, which is no longer allowed. You can
Yeah.
only have a single-story breezeway, which would have stopped that building from
Yeah.
being front to back entire.
That was an unintended consequence. Yeah.
Exactly. So that one exists, but no more are allowed. Commissioner Shaw, you were still
Yeah,
speaking.
I just want to say, I want to directly quote from that Missing Middle book that Pavlik put out, saying, regulating a maximum depth of building is critical for missing middle housing types. Unfortunately, depth is rarely regulated. It is a more direct and effective way to regulate a predictable form than relying on rear setbacks. I think this is critical, or we're going to get really weird-looking houses.
Well, let's look at that. We have time to consider that but this is regarding which change in the zoning ordinance.
Reducing lot width.
Okay. Because
Wait,
So
and how
your
does
concern
that-
is they're gonna be tall and skinny front to back, they're gonna look like a bunch of,
Yes.
Books on a
Have you seen
bookshelf.
those?
yeah, they look ridiculous.
And if somebody builds all the way back to their back setback and then parks their car underneath the house, and so then you kind of have a dead downstairs, you have no yard.
So it kinda looks like the building across the street from, Slabtown.
Yes, yeah. A little bit, even skinnier.
mean,
There's
but
another one
skinnier,
that's over
yes.
by Oriana, I think.
So I would just add that the proposed change in lot width that is only applicable to a small portion would make it consistent with the rest of the R1 and R2. So that hasn't materialized throughout the history of the city. So I don't know that that is a threat. You can't go all the way back because you have to have your building based on our front setbacks. It has to sit within a certain distance of the block average. And so there's a limit to how much impervious coverage you can have as well that kicks in. And if you are in one of the historic districts, there is a backyard requirement essentially of 30 feet between any kind of parking structure and the actual residential house to maintain that historic built form.
Okay, and what happened on Oak Street was that they wrapped the 30-foot yard in a breezeway. Is that what happened?
I think so. I mean, I wasn't here
That
for
is
that, but
I think that's what happened. Yeah.
I had Dave talking on the phone with someone about breezeways, and he was explaining some changes and stuff like that.
I
because-
recall, yeah.
Yeah,
there was a-
you couldn't go all the way through. There's a limit to how long a breezeway can be now and things like that.
And how tall.
And how
That's where we got nabbed on that one.
Right.
We hadn't put a height on it.
Yeah. Commissioner Shaw?
Yeah, I'm curious why athletic fields are in there. In 2021, we talked about taking athletic fields out of the R2, and we took them out.
We did.
You can go and look at the ordinance that's all crossed out from September 2021, but they're back in. Why?
That was never approved, and it wasn't stated in your goals, and this is just reflecting your goals. So again, if you want that taken out, that's fine, but that's not what was in the goals for the last 2 years.
It wasn't approved by the city commission, is that right?
No, the R2 didn't pass the planning commission.
Oh, that was part of R2?
Well, why would we have taking athletic fields out of residential as a goal? I mean, it's,
Again, if you
A
want to do
use.
that, that's your prerogative. No one's
and there's
fighting
golf
against that.
courses too, which may be kind
I
of,
think he's just saying what's in front of us now is reflecting the goals. And the athletic fields are on there because it didn't get fully taken away, but we're not looking at taking those away right now because it's not part of our goals. I was wondering the same thing about parking. We're seeing, I'm seeing parking, that one parking space per unit is required on some, was it, where was it? Is it, I thought it was in R1 area, and that it was being crossed out now, but I thought it was already taken out in the
So,
past.
yeah, this is a problem sometimes when you repeat things numerous times throughout a zoning ordinance. So the amendment in February of '21 did remove it from the parking chapter, but there was an oversight that it was also in the district chapter. So
Okay.
that created inconsistency. And that's why in some cases you'll see some language struck just because it's in another section, and by having it in two, you set yourself up for potential problems in the future.
Mm-hmm. There's also, I'm on page, what page is this? Page 64 of 198. The parking for motor vehicles shall occur only on a surface permitted by this code, but I'm wondering where the surfaces are listed, because they were, in the statement above, it was, there were surfaces listed, but I'm not sure where they might be now.
So we have a whole chapter on parking and circulation, and it's in that chapter.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the parking and circulation. Okay. Great.
Can I ask a procedural question or statement? I don't know. This is what I think I've heard. So right now, what's before us is just a motion to set this for a public hearing for June 6th. In the meantime, we're having an open house on May 16th. Could we, between now and June 6th, whatever concerns we have with what's in front of us, maybe send them to you to be compiled, Chairman Hessing. So then at the next meeting after June 6th, we attack those things. We discuss those things. And then we will be able to make our final recommendation, correct? Is that possible?
That would be the public hearing, June 6th.
I mean, yes, June 6th, but then after the June 6th meeting, when we've heard from the public, when we've heard the open house, the next meeting after June 6th, then we talk about our concerns and try to say, okay, we want to take this out. We're going to keep this in. We're going to, where is this? Like the questions you were just asking. There was an answer.
Wouldn't we then have to have another public hearing if we changed anything?
No,
Commissioner Shaw.
no, I wouldn't think so. No,
Well, wouldn't we hash that out at the public hearing?
you could, yep.
You could.
Right.
But you're also hearing from them on the fly.
But the nice part about doing it at the public hearing is the public is here and
That's
present.
true.
So
Yeah.
if you do want to go down that route, I would just recommend not sending them to David, but to Laura, just
Okay.
open meetings,
Oh, yeah,
things like that.
just so they're compiled in one place
Yeah.
so we can all can see them.
and the public would see those too, because if the public can't see them, then
Yeah, it could
How
just
are
be
they
put in
gonna
a
know what
packet.
our
Let's
concerns are.
place all those concerns in a packet
Yeah.
for the public hearing. All of our concerns, Laura could put them all together. We would have, and then hash that out during the public hearing while listening to comments, and we bring anything that we heard as well from
But
the
also,
open
if there's
house.
already an answer in some other part of the code, that can be put in the packet already, so we have the answer prior to the meeting.
An FAQ, frequently asked questions.
Yes.
Questions more than anything.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
What if this?
Okay.
Is that a way
Commissioner,
to handle it?
Treadwell?
Yes, although the main focus of all this has been on housing, I would like to thank Director Winter, sorry, for putting in expansion of water setbacks to include 25 feet from the ordinary high water mark of Kids Creek. I'd like that not necessarily be expanded in terms of more than 25 feet, but expanded to more inclusive of the waterways in Traverse City, but that will come with the broader set of ordinances that's been termed the riparian buffer ordinance. But since we're looking at aspects of the zoning code and changing other aspects of setbacks, I am glad that Director Winter found the opportunity to work that in here.
I agree.
I agree.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
We added that in September 21. That's from that.
Yeah, that's how long ago we had this conversation.
Yeah, it originated with the R3, which we did before the R2 conversation. There really is very few R1 and R2 parcels that are against Kids Creek, but it was put in deferment to that R3 discussion.
So Laura, can you send us a time frame by when we have to have all of this to you so they can get into that packet?
Absolutely.
Commissioner Duterte?
The last thing I would say is we did receive a letter of support from Groundwork today. I just wanted to call that out because I don't think anybody had mentioned that yet. So that was nice to see from a local organization that tries to hire locally and be a presence within the community.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up.
So we're not going to talk about this anymore. That's the deal, right? We're just going to write it down and send it in.
Well,
That's
unless you want
the
to,
deal
do you have
that
something
you
to
would
bring up?
prefer.
Yeah, please speak.
How about in the R2, I can't figure out how many ADUs are allowed.
The proposed change would be from maximum 2 dwelling units to maximum 4 dwelling units.
So the maximum of dwelling units you could have on the lot would be 4. So I could have a triplex and an ADU, or a duplex and 2 ADUs.
As
If
proposed.
setbacks and lot size allow, which would be the primary limiting factor here.
But I
Mr.
would
Winter?
clarify, not a duplex and 2 ADUs, because it would only be a maximum of 2 structures.
Because it says R1 uses, which would be 3 dwellings per site. It doesn't actually say anywhere, I don't think, it just says R1 uses.
I'll take a close look at that. And the 3 dwellings, for the R1, it has to be a duplex. You know, it can't be, duplex is a new definition where they're both in the same building. Traditionally, R2, we've allowed 2 separate buildings. So now we're saying it has to be 1, and therefore it looks more like a single-family developed lot than something else.
Okay, I'll go one more here. I think we're making a mistake in upzoning across a bunch of different neighborhoods. You know, the R1B is there, that's a lot of territory. And from the experience in Minneapolis, they said the city's approach to use rezoning in an overarching fashion should be avoided in communities that already abound with affordable housing to avoid gentrification. It says just eliminating single-family zoning doesn't make them any more able to benefit or build wealth around their housing. If anything, it makes it easier for gentrification to happen, which is something we're seeing at a large scale all over our neighborhood. Now, this is Minneapolis.
That's North Minneapolis. That was a red line community. That is a black community.
It's now experiencing gentrification.
If without owner occupancy, the owners can build wealth against their renters and rob the community of the opportunity to build their own wealth. That is not, I mean, I want to know
we
if
have
that could be
affordable
happening
neighborhoods
here.
in this town that could be in danger of gentrification if we allow, well, duplexes, unowner occupied with ADUs. I mean, there's just so much stuff in this package. I think just we have to be really careful and not pass an omnibus. To pick out a couple of things that we really think could work, like ADUs by right. I'm very supportive of that. I think that it allows people to use buildings that already exist, to fix up old buildings that are, you don't have to have a new footprint, you don't have to take down trees, you make your alleys look better. It's environmentally very friendly. I think the permit process hasn't probably gone over the top because a permitting process is a barrier in some ways. If I don't have a lot of savings, if I need this process to go on of building a granny flat for myself over a period of years because I have to figure out my plumbing and I've got to figure out my electricity and I have to keep renewing that permit, you know, it's a barrier. Whereas if I'm just out fixing stuff up, it's still going to take a couple of years or 3 years, but little by little I'm putting something together that belongs to me and I can live in or I can rent. So I'm very supportive of that. And perhaps duplexes by right. We've got a lot of really old houses that aren't so great. And a duplex is a nice solution, I think. Allows you still to have a backyard and keeps the house the same, a single-family house size. But all this other stuff, I think it's just this huge experiment that could.
The other stuff includes lots that are twice that, you know, that are.
Oh, no, I think that one's fine too.
Okay.
Lots that are twice the size can have
two houses
I think
on
that's an easy one to allow as well. But reducing lot sizes, eliminating owner occupancy.
Already dog-eared for removal,
And I'm not sure that
potential removal.
Allowing 4 dwellings in all sections of R2 is appropriate either.
Neither am I.
Excuse me?
Neither am I.
Neither am I.
But triplexes, you know, I don't think it would be so easy to build a completely symmetrical, you know, with a box without character with 3 units in it. I think that there's some design opportunity there, and so maybe that, you know, maybe it's a triplex with an ADU or such that. I mean, you know, there's different ways to look at it, but, you know, what I'm hearing from you, Commissioner Shaw, is that you agree with most of these items.
I do. Well, I do.
But
I agree with most of them.
But the idea of grouping them together is troublesome?
The amount of them all coming through at the same time, also during a master plan process, I think is just a little bit overwhelming.
Okay.
So I do think that giving the city commission all the possibilities and letting them decide which ones to eliminate takes the planning commission off the hook once we
but I feel
have
like
all
a rubber
this
stamp
public
then.
hearing. I don't know. There have been lots of times that they don't. I'm not sure we have the votes now, quite frankly. So I'm not sure that would fly through.
I'd just rather see this come apart right now, so that when it goes to public hearing, we know what we're talking about.
What I like about this grouping approach is that we don't have to talk about this for
3
more years. We've been talking about it for 3 years. these are the things we've been talking about. Let's put this forward, and you know, a lot of these things are very small, you know, and so why wouldn't we just get it off our plate? It seems like the right thing to do once there comes a point where we have discussed it enough and agree with the idea enough where we no longer need to talk about it. Mr. Arnold.
To that spirit, I think through this process and through the increased public engagement in the last couple weeks, I think we've all heard a lot of people talking about short-term rentals, short-term rentals, short-term rentals. Clearly, the community is still really worried about that. I think we all are too. So it would be really nice to get this off of our plate, because we've talked ourselves in circles about it for quite a while now. Get this off our plate, let the city commission focus on that, and be able to, you know, look at the next items that would be on our agenda, being able to look at things that the community cares about, because obviously the community cares about this too, but we're at the point where, you know, we've talked about it. We've covered, at this point, almost every angle there is to look at it from. And I think removing maybe the problem spots from the omnibus approach, like owner occupancy, and spending some more time with them wouldn't be, I mean, that would definitely be beneficial, but I think we at least need to let it go to our open house before we like totally pull the plug on it. Because, you know, it may turn out that we get there and there's 20 people who say, you know, I'm in the same position as the woman who was called up to the Air Force, where I, for some reason, have to go for 3 years, and I'd like to be able to rent my house and my ADU. And it turns out that that is actually a really serious need that could do some really serious good. So I don't think there's any reason to pull the plug now on any aspect of it when we still have the opportunity at the public hearing. The city commission will still have the opportunity at multiple hearings. You know, I don't think it would be wise at this point to linger on it any more than we have to, and to like get ourselves ahead of the game before we've done the really, really serious round of public engagement that's coming up in the next month. So.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Agreed.
Commissioner Deturi.
When we don't take the approach of treating all of the residential neighborhoods, like all of R1, all of R1A, all of R1B, and all of like R2 the same, are we not spot zoning? Like if we're focusing specifically on certain neighborhoods that we feel can better handle multifamily changes, because we've heard that a lot from the community. I feel like that falls under the definition of spot zoning. I just want to ask some clarification on that, because I know that that's never recommended.
Yeah, I could see that being considered spot zoning. My bigger concern with that is that approach would probably require you under the Zoning Enabling Act to create new zoning districts, because it says, except as otherwise provided under this act, the regulations shall be uniform for each class of land or buildings, dwellings, and structures within a district. So you can't say this part of R2 you can do this, but not this part, because then you're violating state law.
So it just makes sense to me to kind of keep it as each district, because that just sounds like way more work than we're interested in. And just trying to keep that uniformed. Like if something is happening in R1A, it should happen in R1B. It should, like, those kinds of changes don't promote equity in my mind.
If you're saying if we
were to make
just
allowances in R1A,
zones
but
versus-
not R1B.
You have to be consistent and.
Yes.
Sure.
That's what I'm trying to say.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Well,
Oh, if I can
Public
find
hearing.
it. Do we still want to
It's-
talk?
we can, yeah, would you like to hear some public comment first, or we can, I'll hear a motion and then move to
That's-
public comment before we vote?
Yeah.
Typically.
I I move that the Planning Commission initiated text amendments to Chapter 1320, General Provisions, Chapter 1326, Districts, Boundaries, and Zoning Map, Chapter 1332, R1A and R1B, Single-Family Dwelling Districts, Chapter 1334, R2, Two-Family Dwelling District, Chapter 1364, Special Land Use Regulations, Chapter 1368, Size and Area Requirements, and Chapter 1378, Renewable Energy, to provide additional dwelling types and modified dimensional standards, be introduced and set for a public hearing on June 6th, 2023.
Support.
Excellent, thank you. We have motion and support. Mr. Winter.
So I just want to add one thing before public comment, because it was discussed, and this is for your edification, at the last meeting, and that is the idea that the housing is a regional issue, which it certainly is. And I had mentioned that we talked to, the other planners in the neighboring townships are aware, and they're working on it too. So I was only able to connect with East Bay and Garfield Township, but just some numbers for you. We last year permitted 441 dwelling units. East Bay currently has 539 under construction, 241 that have been approved are waiting to begin construction, and another 1,316 that have gone through sketch plan review, it's called, still needs formal review and approval. So that's a total of 2,096. And in the last couple of years, completed in Garfield Township, this includes like Ridge 45, they've completed 450 dwelling units that are occupied. Under construction, they have another 1,170, and then another 478 that are still in the, they've been approved, but they haven't started construction. So again, 2,098. Garfield also has 13 pilot properties for a total of 873 dwelling units targeted for low-income residents, and they're reviewing a 14th one right now.
And is any of that data disaggregated for how many are allowing short-term rentals? Like our 400, most of those are in the C3, C4.
Yeah, so that is a big thing. Garfield Township doesn't allow short-term rentals. They know that they occur and they're trying to enforce them, but there is no ability to get a license for short-term rentals. And then East Bay Township recently put a moratorium on short-term rentals.
Well, they had an effective moratorium and they made it a matter of policy.
So,
My friend in East Bay Township lives on a block with 9 houses, 5 of which are short-term rentals.
I'm guessing that's Pine Grove?
I know, it's near the border here. But we'll move now to public comment. If you'd like to speak on this topic, please approach the microphone, say your name, your address, whether you're a Traverse City resident, and you'll have 5 minutes.
Hello, Commissioners. My name is Jackie Anderson. I own a home on Comanche Street in an R1B district, and I congratulate so many of you on your research on this topic, and just like you, I have spent hours combing through the zoning proposal, the presentation from Mr. Winter. I've done a deep dive into the hundreds of pages of resources that Mr. Winter supplied, and yet I cannot find answers to 3 really simple questions. How many homes will be added to Traverse City neighborhoods? How much will those new homes cost? And when will they be available to the residents that are anxiously searching for housing? Well, we can't know that, you're thinking. Those answers all depend on private developers. We are merely the enablers here. Yes, but if you look beyond the information that's been supplied by staff to data from places like the Urban Institute that studied results of blanket upzoning over 1,100 communities, here are some possible answers to those questions. Number 1, about 68 new homes may be built in Traverse City. That's less than 1% of the total homes already here, and it's a tiny fraction of the estimate from Housing North that Traverse City needs 1,400 new homes. Answer number 2. Those homes will cost market rate and more. In March 2023, just a couple months ago, the median home value of listings in Traverse City was $475,000. And again, back to Urban Institute, it will take anywhere from 3 to 9 years to see the results of blanket upzoning when you're working through private developers. So, with rather unimpressive results like that, why move ahead with rezoning our neighborhoods? Could it be because rezoning costs nothing? Not a single dollar drawn from the city budget? You can feel virtuous doing something about the housing crisis without spending a dime. To which I say, you get what you pay for. Everyone in this room wants housing for young families. We want housing for working people. We want housing for neighbors who are currently without housing. But I beg you, until you've got answers for Traverse City to those 3 simple questions, how many, how much, and when, please put this zoning proposal on hold and spend your energy and the city budgets on direct actions to make absolutely certain that housing happens in Traverse City. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
Mary Mills, 424 North Elmwood, city resident. I want to address some of the things that were brought up at the last meeting during the presentation. The impervious surfaces will increase by 9% as lot sizes are reduced. I know it says 5%, but when you look at it collectively and you do the numerator, you get the common denominator, it will end up being 9%. Environmentally, this means less green space, trees will be removed, and there will be an increase in carbon emissions as we have more vehicles coming into town. People who lived on the outskirts that can now live in Traverse City, the houses they vacate will not remain vacant. Somebody will be moving into them, and that means those people will need their cars to drive into Traverse City. Expecting that more people will walk, bike, or take mass transit is not really realistic. Weather conditions, disabilities, job locations, work schedules, beta availability, all impact this ideal. Now, our city has approximately 308 vacation homes, 36 tourist homes, and 84 ADUs within 8 square miles. This does not include short-term rentals. An increase in vacation home rentals is a credible unintended consequence. You are creating rentals, not home ownership. So who is really benefiting? In our current zoning ordinances, ADUs are allowed provided they meet the current requirements. Dividing a home into 2 units is allowed, providing they meet the current conditions. Our current zoning ordinances have safeguards. These proposed ordinance changes remove them. By right zoning leaves the final approval or denial with the Planning Commission. This bypasses the City Commission's approval or denial. An example of by right, you mentioned it tonight, is that enormous condo on 7th Street, just down the street from Munson. The increased density in the R2 districts from 2 units to 4 units was brought before this commission in the fall of 2021 and was ultimately defeated. The overwhelming majority of residents who spoke regarding this proposal outlined their concerns, objections, and examples where variances were granted to the detriment of the neighborhood. Why is this being reintroduced? Removing owner occupancy will now provide owners of the rental properties 2 rental incomes for each piece of property, or 3 if they have a duplex. You are providing business opportunities for not only residents, but investors. At the last meeting, it was implied that anyone who disagrees with removing owner occupancy introduces discrimination. This insinuation is unfounded. Our commissioners, whether appointed or elected, are tasked to do what's best for the city and the city residents. Doing what's best involves listening to its residents, valuing and also implementing their visions as well, whether you personally agree with them or not. You held neighborhood listening sessions, but omitted the one topic that directly impacts our neighborhoods: housing and zoning. What has been presented is a plan that will definitely increase density, increase vacation and short-term rentals, and increase outside investors. But what it won't do is provide affordable housing. Your case for density is an experiment lacking justification and evidence. It has the potential, like urban renewal of the past, to create damage throughout the city that is hard to undo. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mills.
My name is Barb Zupan. I live at 207 7th Street. And I brought a couple of, I drove around today and took a couple of pictures of things that already exist. My concern is what's going to happen next after this zoning is changed through the city. And I'll just start with this. Now, this is a single-family home, I think, and this is with 2 additions on it. Now, is this what we can look forward to in our neighborhoods? With obviously, it's not within the range of the height of the neighborhood there. This is the corner of Cass and 11th Street. I'm sure this went through, in fact, I know this went through the Planning Commission because the neighbors were asked, do you want this?
It went through the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Pardon me?
It went through the Board of Zoning Appeals, not the Planning Commission.
Oh, so they built this not with anything from the Planning Commission?
This was a similar footprint to what was there. There was a one-story garage, and they built an ADU above the garage.
Yep, there's the garage. And when I called the city about this, they said, no, they can't go 2 stories because the garage doesn't structurally hold the 2 stories. Well, obviously, they fixed that. And now, but I mean, is this an expectation that we can figure is going to happen with with properties in Traverse City? I don't know that that's what we all are looking for. Another, how familiar with this?
Ms. Zubin, can you tell me again, this is at Cass and where?
11th.
Should be the
It's across from the school.
northeast corner, across from St. Francis.
Thank you.
Next photograph I know you're familiar with. This is just before you get to Munson. I sat in this room and a woman who lives in that house held back tears and said no one was asked before this building was built. They bought 3 properties and put the condos in. She said she can't have a garden anymore, that it has really disrupted her whole family, the neighborhood, but nobody was notified about this condominiums that were put in place on 7th Street. I have some concerns about that. And the last thing that's here, and I know this is all perfectly legal, on 12th Street. Not sure, I didn't count the units in there, but I think there are 12 units there. It looks like 100-foot lot, is it? You're familiar with this, I'm sure.
It's a C2 zone. We're not talking about C2 zones, but yeah.
It's a C2 zoning, okay. So that would not, we wouldn't expect anything like that in our neighborhoods, right? Would that be true?
Nor would we expect what happened on 7th Street because
Right.
we're not talking about the R3 with
Exactly.
zoning changes. Yeah.
I understand that, but I'm saying that there is potential there. I don't know where, but this has been allowed in our residential neighborhoods. You can look anywhere in town, across from Sledders, I mean the developments that are going on here in town. My concern, and I have to tell you, I'm so relieved hearing you discuss these issues, that you're open-minded. I had no feeling that anybody here except Heather was open to any discussion about these zoning changes. And I'm so relieved that you are discussing ADUs, that owner-occupied. I mean, I feel like there is so much money circulating around Traverse City. If a house goes for sale and this zoning stuff goes through and they can rent their house, put an additional piece of property on there, it is for financial gain. It's not about our neighborhoods. It's not about our city. It's about short-term rentals or, you know, financial gain. I looked at the Airbnb site, and, you know, they have lots of Traverse City Airbnbs. I don't know where they are exactly, but there's plenty of them listed for Airbnbs right now in Traverse City. But my concern is if you move forward with this blanket zoning changes without looking at it individually, how it impacts, all these items impact all of our neighborhoods, that you're doing a total injustice to our little city. And that's the draw. I mean, for the downtown, it's the draw of our city, are these neighborhoods and these lovely places where people can walk through and visit and ride bikes. And you start putting enormous buildings and massive properties, you know, it changes. It will change. So thank you. I want to just thank you for being open to the idea of discussing that maybe this blanket zoning is not a good idea. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Zupan.
Good evening. My name's Tom Feldman. I don't live in the city. I live in Garfield Township. I own a property there. I read about this online and these proposals, and I will say to you, I was shocked and stunned that this could happen in Traverse City. And while I may not live in the city, I do my business in the city. I eat in the city. I come to the city. And Traverse City is why my wife and I moved here from Ann Arbor 7 years ago. What I read about these zoning changes will destroy this town. And I'm hoping that each and every one of you are the persons who will prevent this destruction to Traverse City. The current offering is far too broad. It's far too reckless. It's far too many unknowns. And by your own admission, you can never control what happens. You learn that developers find ways around rules. You've learned that hotels are built too close to the roadway. You've learned how to close loopholes. And these proposals are one giant loophole, which between you and me are going to make your lives hell, because you are going to have exception after exception after exception, demand after demand after demand, of people wanting to build new properties. So I would say to you, be very cautious. Don't be the people who ruined Traverse City. Be the people who kept Traverse City great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Feldman. Seeing no others, we'll close public comment. Any other comments from commissioners before we vote? Commissioner Shaw?
Yeah, it just seems wrong to me. It's like, it should go to a study session first, to send in all this writing, and our meeting is in 2 weeks? Is that where the public hearing is in 2 weeks?
No.
No.
A month.
The,
1
the
month.
open house is in
But
2
the
weeks.
open house is in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I don't know, I mean, we've never sent such a messy piece of anything to a public hearing, and we've always had something put together that we could get behind, and this is just a hodgepodge, and then we're taking it to the public hearing where we're supposed to go through all the stuff that we're supposed to turn in, all of our concerns, so, and then the concerns of the citizens. It just seems messy and rushed. I can't vote to support a public hearing, but I'm in the minority, so.
Okay, any other comments? We have a motion and support. If you're ready to vote, please, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
I will have to do a roll call vote. Commissioner Hassing?
Aye.
Deturi?
Aye.
Hershey?
Aye.
Teller? Colbert? Treadwell?
Aye.
Knapp?
Aye.
Shaw?
No, nay.
Martin?
Okay, thank you. Motion carries. We will look forward to our open house where we can have a frank discussion between commissioners and those hosting the event and the public. Please join us, one and all, for that time. And then we'll look forward to the public hearing with any adjustments that we might make between now and then, 2 weeks thereafter. Thank you very much. Moving on now to new business. This is consideration of introducing a special land use permit application received by Addiction Treatment Services to operate a residential care and treatment facility at the existing structure located at 441 East State Street. For introduction, Mr. Winter.
Yeah, thank you. So we received this application from Addiction Treatment Services, who currently owns the building. It is being used as a multifamily building. It's approximately, if I can look here, 4,209 square feet. This use that they're requesting is a city commission SLUP, which means after the planning commission public hearing and recommendation, it would go to the city commission for a public hearing and a final decision. So Addiction Treatment Services would like to operate this residential care facility where they would house up to 10 women, pregnant women and women with children who have been diagnosed with a substance abuse disorder. The average stay would be 30 to 60 days. It would be staffed during the day by 3 to 4 employees, and at night there would be 2. So there would be 24-hour staffing. I mentioned in the memo from staff that this particular property has had a long history of housing women in needs before it was purchased by Addiction Treatment Services, correct? Thank you. The Women's Resource Center owned it, and they operated a facility called Sarah's House. It was a rooming house where they did not offer on-site care and treatment. And before that, it was Miracle Manor, which also was a rooming house for women and their children. It was operated by Overlook Resources, and they partnered with Catholic Human Services. So they did provide care and treatment, but not on site. They would take the residents to a site either in Logan's Landing or off of Hastings Street. So now they're just looking to provide that service at the location. We went through the standards that are listed there in the City Commission SLUP section for this particular use. It is zoned properly for this, as it is zoned R3. Right now, they want to have 10 residents Not being on an arterial collector street, they would be limited to 12 residents. There's a question with the attorney, which we can bring that opinion back before the public hearing, is whether or not the children have to be counted in that 10. It's really geared towards the number of patients, and we don't want to necessarily see the separation of mothers from their young children during that time of care. Off-street parking is provided. They would need approximately 3.3 parking spaces based on a 10-bed operation, and they have space for seven vehicles. At this time, no planned construction to the property. It does say that the design of the structure is approved by the fire marshal prior to the issuance of the special land use permit. So that is a conversation that's taking place right now with the fire marshal and the construction code officer for the county. Construction code officer establishes what the building classification is, or the use classification, which is different than the zoning land use. And based on that, there are certain fire requirements that the fire marshal will look at. So they're looking into that now, specifically digging in to see, since it did have a previous rooming house use, if it had already been inspected in those past situations. Does not include any medical clinical services or outpatient treatment, which would be prohibited. There is one item there for the Planning Commission to consider. It's that it's not used for primary office space, administrative, or regular meetings if located in multiple family dwelling district, although occasional meetings may be allowed upon approval of the Planning Commission. So it is my understanding, and the applicants are here so they can correct this if it's wrong, but their main administrative office is off of Garfield Avenue. So that's where most of the meetings take place, but it is up to you to decide whether it's appropriate for occasional administrative meetings to take place at this location. And then as far as licenses, right now they cannot get their license from LARA, the state regulatory authority, because they won't issue it until the municipality has approved the use. So moving forward, just keep that in mind. That could be a condition of approval. They would also therefore be required to keep a list of all persons residing at the facility, which would need to be a condition of approval. So at this point, we've had our pre-application conference with the applicant. They did submit their application. So next step in the process is for the Planning Commission to schedule a public hearing. They would make a recommendation to the City Commission, who would then hold another public hearing, as I previously mentioned, make a final decision, and then there would be an execution of an order granting. Now, the public hearing, since this for a particular property, in addition to the notice in the newspaper, all the property owners within 300 feet would receive a mailed letter, property owners and occupants. So with that, I will hand it back to the chair, and again, the applicants are here if you have questions specifically about their operation that they are pursuing for this property.
Thank you for that. Just one clarifying question. You mentioned that a Women's Resource Center had used this for women and children in the past. Was there a count about how many children were allowed in that case, or was that not information available?
I would have to go back and look. Let me think about that, yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know if they landed on 10 that they're proposing based on the number of rooms that they have or just staffing and things like that.
Okay.
But it was a different land use classification under its previous use.
Oh, it was?
Yeah, it wasn't a residential care and treatment facility. It was just a rooming house because they weren't providing any care on site.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Treadwell?
Yes, clarification for Director Winter. Is the prohibition on administrative meetings specifically a use-based thing, or is that entirely independent of the spatial configuration? So if they don't have, it's not dependent on them actually having a conference room or any office space there, but they can't have administrative meetings in just a living room area.
I think because R3, because it specifically applies to the R3 district, is a residential district. They wanted to make sure that the primary use was residential and that an organization providing care wasn't also setting up their office space in a residential district. But it does give, again, the Planning Commission the leeway to determine whether it's appropriate for occasional meetings. The nice thing about this organization is that they do have an administrative office.
Yes.
Elsewhere.
My question is whether that's a specific use or it has to do with the structural setup of the space.
To me, it's about the specific use.
Okay.
Because again, it's a residential district.
I'm confused why would we make the determination of whether it's appropriate for occasional meetings to occur and whether, and what defines an occasional meeting?
So it's up to you because simply that's what the zoning ordinance says. It's codified in the ordinance and it does not specify occasional. So
It would seem more reasonable for us to make the determination of allowing a singular office or a conference room in a residential facility, but if an organization already has an administrative office elsewhere, but there could be multiple staff members that happen to be in the same building at the same time, that is not their office building, that they can't have a quick conference in a living room space. It seems reasonable to me and seems like something that we shouldn't have to specifically allow.
Commissioner Shaw?
Well, the question is there an actual dedicated office in this building?
that would probably be a question for the applicant who owns it.
Because if there is a small office, which I would presume there is, it would be, why not let them have standing meetings in there? And the rest of it is, if you're having a standing meeting in a living room, is it really necessary for us to talk
But
about
is
that
it,
at all?
but another question might be about what kind of meetings, if this is a treatment meeting, then it's also the residents versus, and the staff, or not.
Well, if they're going to have meetings there and call them meetings, then they should have a dedicated meeting space.
Should we hear from the applicants about?
Unless there's other ways we can confuse ourselves before.
Yeah,
we do
yeah,
it.
let's get some clarification here.
Sure.
before
If you're having an
we
AA
tie
meeting,
ourselves
because
in
this
knots.
is an addiction treatment facility,
Well-
I don't see why we're trying to regulate against that.
No,
The applicant is here, hello.
Hi there, I'm Paula Lipinski, I'm the CEO of Addiction Treatment Services. We would definitely have an office on the premise to allow for, because there would be 2 therapists assigned to provide treatment to the women. In regards to meetings themselves, we do Addiction Treatment Services, our primary campus is on Garfield. A majority of our administrative work occurs there. But if we are speaking of, that was exactly what came to my mind, was the recovery meetings themselves. But we would, in any of our facilities, we hold those, if it's a recovery meeting, whether it be AANA or any of the other recovery groups, we hold them to the members that reside in the home, if that matters. But ultimately, if it's a condition, we would abide by that. But there will be offices there, and obviously it might be a barrier for 2 people, and are the 2 therapists, and then sometimes 3 staff. So you're talking 5 people. To have a staff meeting would be, a normal occurrence. If we had to go down the street so we can service our women and take care of our community, we would do it. I just say, I'm just being honest. So if that answers your question.
Just clarifying, you said that it would be basically the people that are residing and or working within the building. So hosting a meeting wouldn't be cars driving in, driving up, people approaching the building from outside in order to attend a meeting?
Correct, it wouldn't.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Lipinski while she's here? Any further questions? No?
Appreciate the
Okay.
clarification. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's clear it's not being used primarily for an office, which is what it says.
And I think that's what's key, because it, like for instance, parking is required based on the number of beds. And so if you don't factor in the office component that could be incorporated, if it was used primarily as their administrative location, it may not be appropriate in a residential neighborhood, which is why it's speaking specifically to the R3. But, and I don't think the way it's worded in the ordinance that this would apply to the treatment meetings, because this speaks specifically to like administrative meetings and things like that.
Well, I appreciate that this property has such a long history of treatment services, and this continued use is, just seems, in keeping with its tradition, thus far, and in an R3 zone, so close to downtown, I can see it fitting in well, seemingly to the neighborhood and its location. Anybody have any thoughts, Commissioner Shaw?
I will make a motion.
Okay.
I move that the special land use permit application submitted by Addiction Treatment Services to provide a residential care and treatment at the existing structure located at 441 East State Street be set for a public hearing at the Planning Commission's regular meeting scheduled for June 6, 2023.
Support.
There's definitely a typo in there.
Yeah, there should not be an A to provide residential care and treatment.
Okay. We have a motion and support. Ready to vote? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries.
I would like to recommend that this public hearing be before the zoning one, so that these people
Yes,
can get
we-
some sleep, because they've got work to do the next day.
Yeah. we're-
Good thought.
Thank you so much for spending the time to be with us through all of our previous discussions tonight.
And thank you for the.
Can you provide services for us,
Yeah,
because we
need
could
them.
use them?
Thank you for the important work you do.
Yes, yeah. Okay, I'll open it up for general public comment, but seeing that the three of you have
Are
already,
leaving.
unless you have anything to
Go.
say, you're welcome to approach the mic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and so, commissioners, where are we? Do we have, is this a regular meeting? We need reports. From the Board of Zoning Appeals, we have nothing. From, sorry, the next one.
City Commission.
City.
City Commission.
We are very happy that Nate Geinzer, the interim city manager, has begun work. I think everyone is extremely excited about what he brings to the table, and I think he will work hard to repair any rips that have happened in the fabric of our town and our staff because of the events of the past month. And I'm really looking forward to working with him. He seems great. Anything else you want to?
Well, we awarded the Sarah Hardy Humanitarian Award last night, and we had more lively in our email than in public comment, but a lot of community feedback about the stop sign at Spruce and 6th Street, which we as the City Commission decided to overrule the memo from the city engineer and keep that stop sign.
Yay.
All right.
And that was just all a mistake. They had to do that. They had to write that memo, but somehow it got printed as if it was really going to happen. It's a state regulation, so we had this huge kerfuffle that was completely unnecessary. So that got fixed. So that was good.
Good to hear. Okay, all good news from the City Commission. Excellent. And if nothing else, we'll move to Master Plan Leadership Team.
Yep, so we have a meeting this Thursday at 4 o'clock. I think in the training room or committee room. We'll be reviewing the next two draft chapters, which are the arts, culture, and recreation, and then existing land use. Forgot to add in the announcements earlier, last Wednesday, we also had an event out at Hickory, the focus area design workshop, so a lot of visual preferences that we were asking people about design elements and things like that. So pretty good turnout for that. And I think that's it.
Is that at 4 or 3:30?
Oh, 3:30. We moved it to 3:30 because it's just taking longer to get through the chapters. Yep, thank you, Ted.
Okay, great. Mobility Action Plan Leadership Team.
So they met last week. I was not able to attend because I was out at Hickory. They looked at some additional edits to the map that was distributed. I got to look at it afterwards. We will be having another meeting on May 16th, which is not our regular frequency because May 24th, our consultants have a conflict and need to be elsewhere. And we didn't want to push it out to June because we really want to get working on writing the content for that.
Great, okay.
And that's at 1 p.m.
Yeah.
In 1 p.m.
Yep.
Okay.
That was the date that was picked because they're already going to be up here that day working with us on some other stuff.
Right. And then the planning department at large?
I don't know, not a whole lot, other than, again, to Linda's point, we did get to meet Nate today. We had our weekly staff meeting with him, which was a pleasant meeting, and then our community development meeting in the afternoon as well. So I'm sure his brain's very tired today because just throwing everything at him. But yeah, he's a very pleasant individual.
Was the start date yesterday?
This morning.
Oh, we
8
approved him
a.m.
last night, and he was there
Oh.
this morning.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
He came to the meeting last night as well.
Yeah, and technically, apparently, he couldn't step in as soon as we had voted because.
Because Penny was ready to go.
At midnight.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
And I would just want to commend Penny for that. You
Yes.
know, a month ago, her job functions changed quite a bit, and she just handled it, no complaints, kept the ship moving along, so appreciate that.
Okay. All right. There's no public here, no public comment. Any other comments from commissioners? Ideas in general? Mr. Arnold?
Just real quick, as we come up on summer and then fall again, as the seasons pass, my time with the commission will come up probably sometime late July, early August.
I can't make it stop. I don't.
It's like Adam.
My son's audiobook.
And so the process of finding another me will begin shortly.
I thought cloning takes longer than.
You would think, but we're working on, we're getting it down to just a month. So that's going to start soon. So if you guys have anything that you want, I'll be on the selection committee for that. And I'll also be going around and talking to high school students about the opportunity. So if there's anything that you want me to impress upon them or look for in future candidates or any comments or suggestions you have for the program, please let me know, or Liam Dreyer, the Government for Tomorrow representative that met with you a while ago. That organization is always looking for feedback on how to improve this program because they're all over the state and they're still expanding pretty rapidly. And I'm happy to take feedback as we look for another me. So I just wanted to put that on your radar. Let me know if you have any comments or anything.
Thank you very much.
Are you a senior?
I am a senior.
Where are you going to school?
I'm going to, as of right now, decision day was actually yesterday, but as of right now, I'm going to George Washington University in Washington, D.C. I'm still on the wait list at some other places, but, we'll see.
It's a great school.
Yes, I'm very excited. I'm very excited. So.
Excellent. Well, we're not looking forward to losing you, but
You've been exceptional, Ted.
Thank you.
it's been great having you, and we look forward to continuing with the program. Any other comments? With that, we will adjourn. Thank you all very much.
What are your waitlisted schools at?
I'm waitlisted at Northwestern and Georgetown.
Another great school.
So my chances of getting off are in the single digit